The first time I ever crossed paths with our HOA president, Margaret Denson. She was glaring at my recycling bins like I had just committed a federal crime. She didn't like that. My wife Laura and I had set aside a separate container for batteries. Light bulbs and electronic items we recycled responsibly through a county program. You can't just collect hazardous waste on your property, she sneered, arms crossed as if she were an EPA agent. I laughed it off at first, thinking she was just being nosy. She was the kind of person who lived for control, who treated HOA guidelines like holy scripture, and who believed her word carried more weight than the law itself. I wish I had known back then just how far she was willing to go, because Margaret didn't just fine us. She didn't just send threatening letters. She called in the SWAT team over a box of batteries, and my wife ended up in the hospital because of her madness. And now, Margaret and the rest of her crooked board are about to face a lawsuit that will cost them everything. It started small, as most HOA wars do. I had been storing a medium-sized plastic container in the garage, collecting dead batteries, old power tool cells, and even a couple of lithium laptop batteries that I planned to drop off at the county's hazardous waste facility. We've always been eco-conscious. Laura's a nurse, and I work in it. So between hospital disposables and electronics turnover, we do our best to recycle responsibly. The HOA bylaws said nothing about battery storage, but that didn't matter to Margaret. One afternoon she marched up our driveway while I was unloading groceries. "I've received complaints," she said in that clipped, self-important tone. "You've been hoarding dangerous chemicals. Lithium batteries can explode. That's a violation of community safety." I blinked at her. "Margaret, they're in a plastic container. They're going to the county drop-off next week." "Perfectly. Legal?" She narrowed her eyes. "I'll be watching. If those aren't gone soon, I'll escalate this." I brushed it off mistakenly, believing escalation meant a fine or another nasty letter. But Margaret had bigger, crazier plans. 2 weeks later, I came home to find a neon orange notice taped to my garage door. "Hazardous waste violation, remove immediately or face legal consequences." Signed by none other than Margaret and the HOA's compliance officer. I called her right away. "Margaret, this isn't hazardous waste. The county provides recycling for these items. You're overstepping." Her voice was smug. "The board has determined your home poses a danger to the neighborhood. If you don't comply, we'll involve the authorities." That phrase, "involve the authorities," should have been my warning sign. But I still didn't imagine what she was truly capable of. I moved the container from the garage to my locked shed out back, just to keep the peace, and figured that would be the end of it. But peace was the last thing Margaret wanted. It was a quiet Saturday morning. Laura had the day off, and we were making pancakes when suddenly we heard shouting outside. "This is the police. Come out with your hands up." Before I could even process what was happening, armored officers were storming our front yard, rifles raised. Flashbangs exploded in the driveway. I froze, confused, terrified. What the hell is going on? Laura screamed as the front door was rammed open. She tried to move toward the hallway when an officer shoved her back. She fell hard, hitting her head on the corner of the coffee table. Blood started pouring down her forehead. "Stop. My wife is hurt," I yelled, raising my hands, but they weren't listening. They dragged me outside, zip-tied my wrists, and threw me onto the lawn in front of my neighbors. Within minutes, the entire street was swarming with police vehicles. A bomb squad truck pulled up. K-9 unit sniffed around, and then I overheard one officer mutter the words that nearly made my heart stop. "Anonymous tip about explosives." Explosives, Margaret. That had to be her. After 2 hours of chaos, the SWAT team finally emerged from my shed with the container of batteries. The lead officer walked over to me, his expression somewhere between annoyed and embarrassed. "These aren't explosives," he admitted. "They're just dead batteries." "No kidding," I spat. "Still zip-tied. Told you that before you nearly killed my wife." Laura was already being loaded into an ambulance, dazed and in pain. The paramedics said she had a concussion and needed stitches. I turned on the officer who reported us. He glanced at his clipboard, hesitated, then finally said it. Your HOA president claimed you were stockpiling hazardous explosive materials. Akesa read. Once Laura was stable, I called my lawyer. Nearly dropped his phone when I told him the story. Let me get this straight, he said. Your HOA president called in a false report to law enforcement claiming you had explosives, which led to a SWAT raid where your wife was injured. Exactly. He was silent for a beat. Then, we're going to own that HOA by the time I'm done. The first step was gathering evidence. We requested body cam footage from the raid, which clearly showed officers storming in and Laura being injured. We also obtained the 911 transcript Margaret had called in, using her full name, saying she was terrified for the safety of her neighborhood because we were building an explosive device in the garage. It was blatant, malicious lying. Worse, when the officers pressed her for details, she exaggerated further, saying she had seen me handling wires and chemicals, which was completely fabricated. My lawyer filed a civil lawsuit for defamation false, reporting to authorities emotional distress medical damages for Laura's injury and because the HOA board had backed her initial hazardous waste complaint. We included them in the suit as well for negligence and complicity. At first, some neighbors thought we were overreacting. But then the truth spread. Margaret had lied to law enforcement, weaponized the police against us, and nearly gotten Laura killed. People started whispering about how Margaret had bullied them too. She had threatened to fine one family for illegal bird feeders. She had reported another family for keeping livestock when they were just fostering a rescue dog. Slowly, the neighborhood realized Margaret wasn't protecting them. She was terrorizing them. By the time our first court hearing rolled around, once half the community was siding with us. I'll never forget sitting in that courtroom, watching Margaret strut in like she was untouchable. She had her attorney, a smug man in an expensive suit, and she still acted like this was a minor, some misunderstanding. But then the judge played the 911 call recording. The courtroom went dead silent as Margaret's panicked voice echoed through the speakers. They're building bombs in their garage. I saw wires. I think they're terrorists. The judge turned to her, unimpressed. Mrs. Denson, what evidence did you actually have to support this claim? Margaret squirmed. Well, I heard noises, and I just knew. The judge leaned forward. You sent a tactical response unit into a family's home based on your feelings? Her lawyer tried to object, but it was useless. The body cam footage sealed at Laura's injury. The harmless container of batteries, the chaos Margaret had unleashed. The judge ruled in our favor on nearly every count. Margaret personally was liable for false reporting and defamation. The HOA board was liable for negligence since they had encouraged her harassment. Laura was awarded medical expenses, pain and suffering, and punitive damages. I was awarded damages for emotional distress and defamation of character. The total judgment, just over $2.7 million. Margaret's jaw dropped. The HOA board looked like they'd swallowed nails, and the judge wasn't done. He referred Margaret's actions to the district attorney for criminal charges of filing a false report and reckless endangerment. Margaret was removed as HOA president immediately. Within weeks, she sold her house under pressure and moved out of the neighborhood entirely. The HOA board had to raise dues across the community to cover their share of the judgment and enrage the remaining residents. Within months, the entire board was voted out, placed by reasonable people who swore never to let something like this happen again. As for Laura, she made a full recovery, though she still has a faint scar on her forehead. And me, I still recycle my batteries. But now, every time I drop them off at the county facility, I can't help but chuckle, because those little batteries ended up bankrupting an entire HOA and sending their tyrant president packing. What Margaret never understood is that HOA power has limits. You can't twist rules into weapons. You can't fabricate crimes. You sure as hell can't weaponize the police against innocent people without consequences. She wanted control. She wanted to crush us over something as trivial as recycling batteries. Instead, she destroyed her own life, her reputation, her HOA. And every time Laura and I sit on our porch now, enjoying the quiet, we both smile, because sometimes justice doesn't just happen, it explodes louder than any SWAT raid ever could. This story is just the beginning. There is so much more ahead. Subscribe to the channel to join me on this journey.